Well, welcome back to Still Speak. This is episode 2 of my Summer Wells series. Summer went missing on a summer evening in Tennessee on June 15th of 2021. If you did not see part 1, stop now and do that first. And for the rest, let's get to it because we have a lot to cover. I'm actually recording this episode for a third time. This is a learning process for sure, and I had to learn how close or not close to be to the microphone, what all the knobs mean, and I've even had to, test out spots in my house that are best, and I've recorded up to the 8th episode of the series so far, and I can tell you there's a lot of great content as we go along, and it does start to flow a little easier from episode to episode. I'm telling you this to be fully transparent. So please bear with me as I learn and grow through this process. I want to talk about, in this episode, the social media pros and cons and pitfalls of social media, and about when a case involves families that speak with the media and what is commonly said about these types of interviews. Don Wells, Summer's father, gave the first interview as a representative for his family, of course under heavy scrutiny, which always happens in these cases. The public hangs on to every word and overanalyzes every little thing the person does, from eye blinks to breathing to the way they touch their face and, attempts to play body language experts, and myself included. I do the same thing. The most common theme amongst groups about this interview with Don was that, why didn't the mother, Candace, speak to the media, since she was the one that was there when Summer vanished? This, of course, to them means she's guilty, right? They start running around the group saying, if you got nothing to hide, then why are you hiding? Why didn't you do an interview? Oh my God. Talking to the media is a situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you give one, everyone overanalyzes you and thinks you're suspicious and, are ready to hang you. And if you don't, then there must be, you must be hiding for a reason. Boom, case solved, the person's guilty, right? I've seen this in many cases, and I can give you a few examples of those. And all 3 of these are semi-recent, and they happened, I think, in the last 2 years or so, maybe even 3 years. Let me start with Harley Dilley. Harley Dilley was a teenage boy who went missing, and his mother received a lot of scrutiny, and she did do an interview, and people were accusing her of killing her son. And they just really did not like her at all, and how she spoke of him and how she reacted to him being missing. They really didn't like her. So what happened was with Harley, unfortunately, was that he actually had climbed an abandoned house not far from his home, and he climbed into the fireplace at the top of the house. And sadly, he didn't realize that this was very dangerous, and he ended up getting stuck. He died a very, very horrific death. I mean, there are no words to describe that. So in the end, his mother wasn't guilty, despite the fact that the entire public had deemed her so. And she did give an interview. The next one, Shane Carey, was the fiance, boyfriend, depending on who's speaking, of Heidi Broussard. And when Heidi Broussard and her 2-week-old baby went missing together, everybody honed in on Shane, calling him Chris Watts 2.0, or calling him Scott Peterson, saying that his tears are fake. They even at one point said that during his media interview, it looked like he had a heroin needle in his pocket. They went to town on Shane. They picked his interview apart like you wouldn't believe. And the end result was that Heidi had been kidnapped along with her 2-week-old baby by a quote unquote best friend from church camp. And it was a situation of this friend had pretended to be pregnant at the same time as Heidi. And of course, she wasn't, and therefore she had to produce a baby. And she chose her, again, quote unquote, best friend. She ended up killing Heidi, but did not harm the baby. And ironically, in that story, there was a friend, or somebody who claimed to be a friend, of Heidi, who went on a YouTube channel to talk badly of Shane when Heidi was still, missing. And while they were alive and she was talking bad about Shane, the breaking news came through that they had found Heidi, and they had found her at the best friend's home, which was really awkward, if you know what I mean. And then another one, so Shane ended up not being guilty, okay? He had nothing to do with it, and yet the whole public, again, wanted to hang him. And the next one was a little girl. She was 6 years old. Her name was Faye Swetlick. Her mom did not do an interview, and that really bothered people. They thought she was hiding for a reason. They thought she was guilty. They accused her, yada, 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 yada. And what happened with Faye was she came home from school, and she wanted to play outside in the front. And her mom allowed her. She was alone. She was 6 or 7. She was very young. And she, unfortunately had been taken, we find out later, by someone who lived close by, who used your imagination and then murdered her and left her body in a field close by. And this mom got a lot of hate for allowing her daughter to play outside in the front. And the only thing I'm going to say to that is, we all parent differently, and we all have our own comfort levels. I do not allow my children outside without me. However, I have friends that do. I understand that this is not something everybody would do, but some do, okay? When I was a kid, I was everywhere at that age, but it was a different time, so I am much more cautious. And especially because I follow true crime, I'm even more cautious, right? Because I've heard stories. And this poor mom got so much hate. Oh my goodness, it was crazy. And unfortunately, that decision may have played a role in her daughter ended up, being taken. She might have just felt comfortable because this was a neighborhood. It was almost like a townhome type of looking neighborhood. And, there's people around. It was daylight. Maybe she knew the neighbors. I don't know. Moral of the story here is you have 3 different stories in the last 2 to 3 years, right? A teenage boy, a fiance and missing 2-week-old baby, and Faye, this little girl. They all go missing. All 3 are deceased, unfortunately. And all 3 of the people who were accused of harming them ended up not even being involved. 2 did give an interview and was crucified over it. And 1 didn't and was still crucified over it. So there's the moral of the story, okay? When a case begins and the public takes interest in the story, groups are formed quickly, specifically on Facebook, and then thousands of people from all different walks of life, backgrounds, ages, locations, experiences, all of that, they come together in one place. Pure chaos ensues. I mean, just pure, utter chaos. Especially when a case has little information out there yet. Speculation is off the chart. Theories here, there, everywhere. Rumors flying all over the place and trying to sort those out. Sources start coming out of the woodworks, claiming they know all sorts of things. And we find out later that most of them just wanted their 15 minutes of fame. But these sources will send the groups into a frenzy, and members start clinging to every little thing that a source says it's fact. And then we're all left deciphering, what's fact, what's rumor, is this true, do I believe them, I don't know, do you believe them? It's just craziness. But as time goes on, some people drop off following the case, while others start to branch off into what I would say are echo chamber type groups, where everyone's opinion is the same. And while discussions are happening, right, and there's no arguing, there are no opposing views to challenge you. I mean, I'm in many groups for different topics with like-minded people, and for certain topics I do like that, but I also do enjoy discussion with opposing views. But it's become almost next to impossible to do that in true crime. And then we're going to get into why I think that is happening. Before the groups split off into these separate groups or echo chamber type groups that I just mentioned, in my experience, the groups start to organically form into different categories. And again, in my experience, two main categories are the dominant categories, and those are emotionally attached people, one category, and fact-attached people, the second category. One becomes attached to their emotion, obviously, and the other to the facts. And these two sets of people bump heads in a massive way in the groups. Especially if there's a lot of people that are in the group that are new to, true crime. Like this is a particular case, is their first case that they're following. It's just battling it out constantly. I'm a fact-attached person. I feel sympathy for a victim, absolutely. And as I said, and those connected to the victim, but I love discussing facts more than anything. I do. And in order to do that, I'm sorry, but I must remove all emotions from the equation. Emotional attached individuals, for one reason or another, have taken on the victim or the victims as their own child or children, relative or relatives, or friend. They're the type of people who will make posts in the group saying, that they haven't slept because they're thinking about the case. They have been crying all day because they've been thinking about the case. Or they talk about having a dream about the victim. Those types of posts. Even some posts saying they got a tattoo of a victim that they never met. Yes, that happens. And it's mind-blowing. It's a little strange. But hey, to each their own, right? I don't think there's anything really wrong with feeling sympathetic or empathetic, or getting emotionally attached, but it does become a little problematic when you're trying to discuss true crime cases, when those emotions take over all rational thinking, or you are harassing or attacking or sending death threats to someone who is involved in the case, or to other strangers on the internet, or it clouds your judgment of the case. Some emotionally attached individuals love to accuse fact-attached type people of being heartless. And they say, we're defending or justifying a crime or a criminal. When fact-based people are just trying to stick to what can be proven, and sometimes facts are good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're really ugly facts. And in order to fully understand a story or to learn from a story, all people involved in it must be discussed. Unfortunately, yes, even the victim and the victim's patterns and behaviors and decisions, etc. It needs to be reviewed and it needs to be discussed. I don't know many people who want to go around, talking bad about a victim. Right? Because we're typically raised to do otherwise. But there are instances, and it seems recently more frequently, where the victim does need to be discussed. And it helps no one or nothing when someone emotionally involved comes at us with something like, so-and-so didn't deserve to die, as a rebuttal to us discussing the facts. Or they'll say, well, that doesn't excuse murder. Or, Who cares? Blank was having an affair. She was murdered. I mean, it goes without saying, right? A victim didn't deserve to die, and no one is saying that. And I don't think anyone's going to excuse any kind of murder. But there could be explanation as to why it happened. Even if that means a victim may have played a role in the why of how that happened. Okay? I'm going to say that again, because I want that to sink in. Okay? I do not think anyone is going to excuse any kind of murder, but there could be explanation as to why it happened. Even if that means a victim may have played a role in the why of how it happened. Okay? I hope you heard that loud and clear. We still believe that the suspect should be held accountable and face the consequences of their actions, regardless of any reason behind it. Murder's not okay. Should go without saying. But for some reason, it constantly needs to be said. I really don't understand why, but it is what it is. Okay? So, now, I think there's a little bit of an exception there. An example would be like, if my neighbor found their kid being molested or murdered by someone, and they walked in and then killed the person who was trying to kill their kid, well then, some of us might actually excuse it, right? Some of us may actually excuse that murder, and we'd be like, wow, that was really understandable, and I might have done the same thing, right? But the majority of murders, nobody is trying to excuse it at all. Not at all. So, let's move on. So, let me give you an example. I'm actually going to give you two examples. A made-up one and a real one that's going on right now in another case. So, let's do the scenario here. If a woman leaves her house for a run on a path, and she runs this path every single day without her cell phone, and without any type of weapon like mace, butter knife, pocket knife, whatever, right? And she has earbuds in, she's got both in, and she's got it on the highest volume listening to some podcast, and not paying attention to her surroundings. And she ends up sadly attacked and murdered. We must discuss how or if the decision she made that day played a role. Right? Follow me. Why? So we can learn to limit the risk of it happening to ourselves or to people we love or future generations, and so we can teach our children how to protect themselves better or how to handle, bad relationship in other scenarios where it's not a jogger. Maybe it's like a story of a bad relationship, which we're going to talk about a case here in a second. It's a bad relationship. Now, this jogger can't be saved, but her story can be a lesson for others. So, now I go out for a run. I don't run. That's why I'm laughing. But let's just say I do. And I make sure to have my cell phone, some kind of weapon of sorts. I only have one earbud in. The volume is low. I mix up my paths. I make sure I go all these different ways. I make sure I tell somebody where I'm going and where I'm going to be. And I'm paying attention and do everything the opposite of what she did. Right? Because the story's in my mind. I hear her story. The story's on my mind. I think of the story every time I go running because it sticks out in my head. And so I consciously say, I'm going to do everything the opposite way. Right? In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to worry about these things, but the reality is we do have to worry. And so this is not blaming, accusing, or justifying what happened to this, in this instance, made-up victim. It's just not, but it does need to be discussed. Now, let's look at a real case that's ongoing right now to be used as an example. So, Suzanne Morphew out of Colorado. If you don't know about it, There's hundreds of videos on YouTube. You can look it up. Suzanne has been missing since Mother's Day of 2020. I've been following the story since then. She's still missing, and her husband, Barry, was arrested in May, even though her body has not been found with her murder. And right now, they're going through the preliminary hearing phase of the case. And it came out that not Barry, but Suzanne was having an affair. 2-year-long affair, mind you. Suzanne is a victim, right? She's missing or deceased. But her affair does matter to this story. In order to consider all the possibilities, even though it doesn't make her look good. It's a fact. She was having one. And we need to discuss it in order to figure out how it played into why she is now missing and probably deceased. It's unavoidable. I'm seeing people in all the groups going, who cares? It don't matter. It don't justify. Nobody's saying it does. But it's important to discuss. Blows my mind. Now, we don't know yet if Barry is guilty, even though many do believe he is, and maybe, probably he is. If he is guilty, is it justifying or defending whatever he did when we discuss her affair? Like I said, no, we're not defending or justifying. Nor are we saying that it gives him a right to harm her because she was having an affair. But it matters if he is guilty because it can give insight into a possible motive and show us the dynamics of their relationship. And their relationship matters in the grand scheme of how it ended with her being missing. That's just reality. And we need to even consider, with this affair in mind, that she may have ran away, or the person she was having an affair with may be involved in her disappearance. He did not come forward to the police about the affair, and he hid it when it came out that she was missing. That's sketchy. People went after Chris Watts' mistress like crazy. And yet I'm not seeing a lot of people talking about this guy Suzanne was having an affair and what he did to hide this affair. But that's besides the point. Weird. Double standard type stuff. But anyway, no doubt this affair will be part of Barry's defense in a courtroom. There's no question about that. This affair is going to be used and it's going to be talked about over and over. And if you are emotionally attached to Suzanne, that is going to really bother you. And if this trial is televised, I suggest you not watch it because it's gonna be brutal. Anyway, we can maybe cover that case next because now it's in the phase where it's not just rumors and speculation and theories. Now we're starting to get facts that the police collected. We're getting more information and what have you. And so there can be a lot for us to discuss and really kind of comb through the facts and really see what's what with that case. But we'll talk about it another time. So please don't rate me after my Summer Wells, story analysis and just ignore everything I outlined and send me some nasty email telling me I'm defending or justifying a potential crime or criminal. And I say potential because in Summer's case, we at this point have no clue what happened to Summer, despite the mobs of people who are, in their minds, 100% sure of her parents' guilt. You don't know if they are, and neither do I. So that's a fact. We don't know. Social media is a great thing, You can connect with people all over the world, keep up with family and friends, network, promote businesses, and so much more. And there's a lot of good that comes from social media. But there's also a ton of bad. And I would say an example of bad would be 2020, involving the election and COVID. Enough said, right? Or do I need to say more? I know many of you lost a friend or pissed off grandma on social media in 2020. I know I did. When it comes to a crime or when someone is missing, it can become an amazing tool to be used to help in a variety of ways, right? Thank God for technology and advancements. Just click your app to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, or any other social media platform. Make a post, get it posted, and viral under an hour. Of course, after contacting your local police. I mean, don't make a post and then call the police, because then I will find you suspicious. The downfall is that you're now vulnerable and you're up for public consumption. And with public consumption comes public scrutiny over every aspect of your entire life. Like, if you skipped school when you were in 9th grade, Web Sleuths is going to find out. They are. I mean, okay, maybe not that extreme. But they're going to find something way back in your past that you're like, you even forgot that you did something. They're going to find out. Just letting you know. It's crazy. It's absolutely wild. You know, most people, when somebody goes missing, is desperate for help. You know, and they don't really, most of them, don't really have any experience, you know, following true crime cases, right? So they have really no idea what will come with speaking publicly, and they get blindsided by it. And I've talked to a few families in the past that described how shocking and overwhelming it feels, and they had no idea, you know, that it would be that way. They described it being so overwhelming, but the desperation made it all worth it. I've always been one, you know, who said if I was ever the last one to see someone, or if my spouse was missing, or my kid, or I thought I was a suspect in law enforcement's eyes, you know, which most spouses' parents are the last person to see the missing person are, I would immediately get a lawyer. Now, I don't have funds or something like that, but I would do my best to figure it out one way or another, borrow money, ask people, I don't know. And I would also not do a lie detector test, because there's a reason, you know, why they're not used in a courtroom. They're not an exact science. And lastly, I would want the lawyer to be present or advise me when talking to anyone, whether that's the media or law enforcement. And most people in the public assume all these things would mean that one is guilty, but it's actually the person is wise. In some case, it's not wisdom, but guilt for sure. You need to protect yourself. And, you know, law enforcement, why I highly support them, are human. And sometimes they get it wrong, or they get tunnel vision, which is how we end up with people in prison who are later proven innocent. In the event that your child goes missing, time is not on your side, and so there's not a whole lot of time to contemplate it, you know, about whether or not taking it to social media is the best choice for your family, or, you know, to get a lawyer to advise you. Like, the lawyer might have a busy schedule and your kid's missing. You don't really have time to wait around for them. So it really depends. Once you're already in the, you know, under public scrutiny, it doesn't matter really at that point whether you do 1 or 20 interviews. Your entire life, past and present, is already being dug into, analyzed, and judged. Period. Sorry. That's just the way it is. I'm guilty of looking into people's lives because photos and videos and posts and relatives, etc., they give us information on the people involved, and they give us a backstory and some context. And context is key. However, I have never used any of that information to harass, attack, or accuse anyone directly. It is just for me to get a better idea about the story and to be able to discuss that with others. Now, many do use it to attack and harass and dox or send death threats to people that they have deemed in their minds as guilty in the court of the public opinion. In Summer's case, her parents, once they did speak out, have continued to do such across the several platforms. Some can view that as trying to control the narrative. Others may see it as wanting to show they're not involved. Others may see it as just wanting to keep her story alive. Only they know why. They continue to do such, you know, and after a recent interview, I have a feeling that Candace is, has lost some trust in anyone seeking to give her a platform, and I think we're going to see a little bit less of her now, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not really sure. And it's a shame, it is her story and it is her daughter. But what commonly happens is people take advantage of these families for clicks, and they mislead them or break their trust so they can get views and followers and what have you. Now, I've noticed some creators recently have said they need to stop doing interviews and stay off social media. They're quote unquote not helping. I mean, who are they not helping? If it's just because they're not helping you and making you more confused, well, you really don't matter, honestly, right? Unless they're harming the police investigation, they're not really harming anything. You know what I'm saying? Now, I agree in certain circumstances and cases where families should stay off social media or YouTube. And let me give you an example here. Shanann Watts' family came out about a year and a half, might be 2 years ago now, saying that they wanted everybody to stop talking about the case, move on to another case. They were going to make a Shanann's law. They were working or trying to make everybody stop talking about the case, etc., right? Well, that's never going to happen. They can't make people stop talking about the case. I mean, we still talk about, cases from the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s. I mean, it was a high-profile case. It's going to be talked about and referred to for years to come. There's no way of stopping that. But you can stop feeding that, okay? Now, Chris is in jail. He's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter if he did it all, if she was involved, if the girlfriend was involved, if his company was involved. It doesn't matter. He's in prison. He's not going anywhere. Okay? It would take a leap of fire to get him to get back in a courtroom because he took his plea deal. And so the case is therefore closed. There's no activity. And so, yeah, we probably should move on from it. If you're still talking about the case, it's time to move on. Okay? Because there's a lot of other cases and missing kids and what have you that we can be discussing and trying to help. That case is sadly over. But the problem is they say this, the family, and then they go on YouTube. And they do interviews. Or they go in the chat of somebody's YouTube channel. And they leave comments about the case and things surrounding their case. And they also, after this press conference telling everybody to stop discussing the case, went on to team up with Netflix to give input into the documentary that they put on Netflix about the case. Well, that makes no sense. So you want everybody to stop talking about the case, but you're continuing to talk about the case. That's not going to work. You're still feeding the beast. And what happened with Netflix is when Netflix came out, with the help from the family, who's saying they wanted everybody to stop talking about it, was that it actually made a second generation of people who had never even heard the story or didn't follow it from day one come out, and now we had a whole new group of people discussing the case and revisiting all these things that the first generation already went through. So all they did was bring more attention and more talk about the case. So yeah, in this situation, I would say, guys, if I agree with you, the case is done, everybody needs to move on to another case, but you guys should also probably consider stop feeding it and continuing the talk. With Summer, right, she's currently missing. So that's a little bit different. And so to get her name out there, they never needed to speak out. They owed us, the public, nothing. They have actually done more than I would have. Allowing people to come to the house to tour them, the property, and to take videos of sheds or dog trails on the property, and, so that people could see the possibilities of how she disappeared. They were under no obligation to speak at all. And in some cases, families don't, like we just discussed. There is a missing 5-year-old boy in Fruitland, Idaho, he's been missing for a few weeks now. And besides statements made through the police, the parents haven't done an interview. Cops advise you not to, but typically, some will listen and some don't. So, stopping now wouldn't stop judgment or attacking them or harassment, but only one interview opened that door. What it does do, though, it does give more content for people to overanalyze, make posts and videos, and in return, the family then does another interview to defend themselves, which is kind of human nature, and some people can tune that, the noise out or ignore the hate and the accusations, and others, by instinct, want to defend or explain themselves further, or to, dispel rumors. The Wells are almost, also human like us, everyday people. Maybe not exactly like you or me, but still everyday, run-of-the-mill people. And if it helps them to speak out or defend themselves, then that's their choice. After all, as I said, it's their story. I can't say, nor is it my place, having never been in that situation, if it's a good or bad decision, but time will tell, right? We'll find out eventually. Public speaking's not easy. I remember in high school taking a public speaking course, and as a requirement when it was presenting day, no one wanted to go up first, right? You're kind of looking at each other like, you go. No, you go. I'm not going. No, you go. You go, and then I'll go. And then they go, and I'm like, I ain't going. Nobody wants to do it, right? Because it's really nerve-wracking, and it's, some of the most highly trained public speakers have a hard time every time they take a stage and have all eyes on them. It's difficult. And I've never been interviewed involving my missing child, but for another topic, and oh my gosh, it was so hard. A lot of what I had in my head to talk about just flew out the window. That's why I have notes for this, because forget it, I'll be all over the place. I'm nervous right now, and I'm talking to a microphone, but I know people are gonna, see it. Well, I'm not really nervous, but you know what I mean? It's uncomfortable. It's not something that comes naturally. It just doesn't, at least not for me. And the Wells are clearly people who, besides maybe church, are not used to publicly speaking. Now, add in a missing child to the equation, and yeah, you might get some odd behaviors, and it could be due to being mentally distracted. And over the course of these few interviews, I have felt they've actually become more comfortable speaking, and it's often said in these cases when these interviews involved that the person who's giving this interview shows no emotion. If it were me, I would need to be sedated. Oh my God, they were so calm. And this is said in all cases that involve an interview. It was said about Shane Carey, who we talked about earlier. It was said about Harley Dilley's mom. It's been said a million times that people automatically go to, they show no emotion, they didn't cry, and they make these very blanket statements, and they talk as if they know how they would be in that situation, yet you just don't know how you would be. And emotions are not just crying and sad, it's also happy and concerned and mad. I mean, we learned that in kindergarten, so to say no emotion is not accurate. But beyond that, just because you didn't see what you were expecting to see, based off how you think you would be in the same situation, even though you have no idea unless you experience it, doesn't mean they have not shown any emotion at all. It could be that they've done so off camera. Just because you didn't see it in an 8 or 30 minute clip doesn't mean it's never happened. It could be that they've cried till they can't cry anymore. That's an actual thing. Could be they're trying to be strong so they can properly answer the questions or get information out without blubbering. Could be they're the type who don't want to show others emotion. I mean, I know people who won't cry in front of others. They just won't. We're all on different emotional levels. When I get really mad, I cry. I don't know. Don't ask me. I know other people do, but I know not everybody does. But, again, we're all different. But why do you want them to cry? Most likely their child is not seeing them on TV. Okay? So is the crying just to make you feel good so that you can feel content? I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little weird that you want to see them to have emotional breakdowns. I just don't understand that, but hey, whatever, right? But even if they pushed out tears to satisfy the public, then the public, aka the consumers, would say it was fake, even though it may have been 100% real. So, again, we're back to damned if you do and damned if you don't. We are not seeing these people 24/7. You have to remember that. You just do, right? Keep that in mind. Sometimes you have to, really remind yourself of this. We don't know what's going on when it's not on social media or on YouTube or whatever. We don't know what's going on. We're not with them at all times. Another thing often said about these interviews is when the person speaking will use past tense, and observers will say things like, that means they know the person's dead because they're speaking in past tense. And I really wish people would stop assuming this, because there's a ton of cases again where someone used past tense and this blanket statement was then said, and not all those people ended up being guilty. So it's a statement or an assumption that doesn't really hold a lot of weight. Here's the definition of past tense. It is used to talk about a completed action in time before now. Summer is missing, so most everything discussed would be a time before, guess, now. Both parents have actually used past tense, and most of the public caught it, but most ignored that they did the same when discussing their boys. I can give you an example. Candace was discussing Summer enjoying her swing, and she was telling Chris that she loved this swing. And when he asked, why, and she was like, she just did. All the kids did. She didn't say do. The boys, while not living in their home right now, and we are going to discuss that later, are not deceased. Yet she talked of them in a past tense way. She said did, not do. But, even if they didn't do that for the boys too, Summer's been missing for a long time, and parents start to lose hope, and they consider the possibility they may never see their child again. And some lose hope on day 1, others on year 2, some never lose hope, again, because we're all different. Point being is, we cannot just automatically assume, oh snap, that's a red flag when it comes to past tense. Now, Don actually even says in one of his earlier interviews that he was sorry he was using past tense and he knew that the public didn't like that. But he said you start thinking about never seeing her again and it just happens, meaning past tense just happens. And I can totally see that being the case. Another thing during these interviews in many cases, people will confuse what are guilt with feeling guilty. So a parent can feel guilt even if they're not involved. If they felt they could have done or said something differently to avoid what ultimately happened. And so it may present to the public as red flags of guilt of the actual crime, but really it may just be a red flag of feeling guilty and it's weighing on them. So those are two different things. Another thing is, people want to see a plea to some kidnapper or abductor as if that proves anything. I mean, there's criminals who have made pleas knowing dang well they're doing it for no reason because they did something. Chris Watts did. He made a plea for his family, and no matter who killed who or who killed anybody in that case, the fact is that he disposed of his family's bodies, and he did know where they were, and he stood on a porch and pled for their safe return, or half pled for their safe return, knowing full well he was speaking to no one. Barry Morphew, he made a video, offered a reward money of excessive amount, and did a plea for his wife's safe return, and he's currently sitting in a prison cell waiting on trial for the, disappearance of his wife. So a plea really doesn't prove much. Right? Okay. But let's take that further. Because I'm going to try to be careful with my sarcasm here. I'm going to try. I have to ask this. A criminal who abducts a child doesn't have a conscience. Or they ignore their conscience, right? You know, do you think that criminals are at home with the child, like, and the child's in the other room, and the guy's, like, drinking a beer, like, watching TV, and, the parents come up on the screen, he's like, oh, I think that's the girl in the other room's parents. Aw, they missed her. Aw, they really loved her. Oh, you know what? I feel really bad. I'm gonna go turn her and myself in. Do you really think that if this child is kidnapped, that this is what's going to happen if a parent makes a plea? You just want the plea to make you feel better about them. But again, people have made pleas knowing full well they were involved. So it means really nothing. So just, I don't know. Just think things through, I guess I should say, to people who do that. I mean, it doesn't really make sense, right? Kidnappers are going to be like, aw, I feel so bad now. They just won't. I wish. I mean, think about how easy that would be. Oh. Some people have pointed out that Don uses he and she wrong sometimes, and I give this, I don't think this is anything. My grandma years ago, when she had a bunch of grandkids, a bunch of kids, and a dog, she would constantly call me the dog's name. Not because she didn't love me, and she wasn't even old. She was in her 50s at the time. But, there's a lot of names to remember, so she would get all confused, and she'd end up calling, it was like a big joke in my family that she would call me the dog's name. I don't think much of this. People made a really big deal out of this. I don't know why. Don doesn't speak like most people, and I really don't think it's anything like that. I think it's just an oopsie. Like, oops, maybe he was thinking of the boys and said, he and meant to say she. Who knows? I don't think that's a big deal. If multiple interviews from the same person are involved in a case and a detail is mentioned in a later interview that had not been said in prior ones, we shouldn't jump to the conclusion to say, why has this never been mentioned before? If this was true, they would have shared this already. Or, oh my God, they didn't say that before. The story's changing. Oh my God, that was a slip up. They weren't supposed to say that because they held it intentionally. And now they said it, so they slipped up. And oh my gosh, we caught it. We caught them. During an interview, the interviewer is the one usually controlling the conversation. So it could be possible they didn't have an opportunity to bring it up in one interview, but found an opportunity to bring it up in another. As long as investigators know, that's all that matters. Because again, the public really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the story. I mean, we're discussing the case for us and to learn from it and because we enjoy it or whatever the case may be. But we don't matter as long as the information the police have is accurate and nothing is being withheld from them, So this whole idea of people running around thinking they caught them in a slip up, I mean, it might be, but you can also just consider that they just didn't say it before because they didn't get an opportunity to do so, right? Now, before I end this, and before we continue into the rest of this series, I want to say, this isn't The Price is Right. It's just not. I mean, if you have a theory or opinion and it becomes right, we find out in the end, you're not going to win a free fridge, or a boat, or a chance to spin the big wheel. You're just not. This is somebody's real life. This isn't a story at the library. This isn't a movie that you can turn on Netflix, at least not yet. Okay? This is real people involved. Real people, just like you. None of us are going to win anything in the end of this. This isn't a competition. What drives me so crazy is at the end of these cases, the ones that get solved, if whoever's opinion, quote unquote, won, which I hate to even say, but, they won, the other side gets called out, and there's a celebration. People start making posts like, I told you, I knew it, I said it from the beginning, where are all the people who defended him, where are all the people who said this, where's all the people who said that, like, calling out all the people who had the opposing view that was wrong. Like this is a game. Okay? Just because you get one case on point, or your gut instinct about the case was right, or you analyze the case enough to come to the right conclusion, doesn't mean that will be the case for every single case you follow. Just won't be. Same thing with cops. And they're trained. They don't get every single case right, or the right person, or sometimes not even solved. So just keep it in mind. When I see these things in groups, like people arguing like this is some kind of competition or game show, my immediate thought is The Price is Right. I'm just like, these people think like, Bob Barker is going to be like, come on down! No. This is a real life story with real life living, breathing people with skin and eyeballs and hair. Okay? So, that's all for now, and I'm going to be starting on the next episode, because this was a re-record, I was recording this again, and, I had one more that I wanted to re-record, but in the next episode, we will pick up where we left off, and we're going to start to discuss each individual that is closely involved in the story, and their interviews. So I'll see you real soon. Bye.